4-point game. DeJulius puts up a three. And goal!
Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network. I'm your host, Russ Heltman, as we come off of the spring game, ready to recap it alongside my co-host, Neil Meyer of the Front Office News and Bearcats Talk. You can catch both of us at Bearcats Talk. Still allbearcats.com, but shortly moving to bearcatstalk.com. In the near future, plenty to talk about from this weekend. Portal news popping as well. Some women's basketball recruiting news that we'll get to on today's show. So much to do and not a ton of time to do it. So we'll get to it in just a few quick moments here. Obviously had the spring game go down this past weekend. No kind of defined scoreboard out there. They weren't running a red team versus a black team or anything like that. I hope they do that eventually during one of my years covering a spring game. I've never actually watched a team of the Bearcats program go against one another in an inter-squad scrimmage, so to speak. But good work for Brendan Sorsby and the crew out there at Nippert Stadium. Decent showing from the fans for the free events. We also had the New Heights live event over the weekend. 12,500 plus fans in Fifth Third Arena. It was the loudest I've ever heard that arena. It was a electric night in front of all of the Kelsey fans and UC fans alike, and so much more. Portal popping right now as Rayvon Griffith confirms he is coming back to Cincinnati while the Bearcats get ready to host the likes of Bradley's Connor Hickman and maybe potentially welcoming back an old four-star friend from 2023 that denied the Bearcats but is looking for a new college home and may see the fruits of recruiting hard in high school leading to an eventual transfer to that hard recruiting program in the college ranks. Before all that, though, we got to tell you about Bet Online. It's your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, shout out Scotty Scheffler, near wire-to-wire winner at the Masters, NBA, and NHL playoff statistics. All the latest stats, news, and scores are available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there with Bet Online. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. So we take a quick break here. We'll get into the full show and all of the spring game festivities, plus what the spring transfer portal looks like for basketball and a football entry as well. We'll touch on all that coming up on Bearcat Blitz. Neil, we had the spring game go down this past weekend. We'll leave the floor open to you, my man. Your thoughts on a beautiful weather day at Nippert Stadium, some good work done by the Bearcats, and just your overall thoughts before we dive into a couple MVPs and top performers all across the field.
Yeah, it was a beautiful day at Nippert Stadium on Saturday where Scott Satterfield and this Bearcats team hit the field running for their annual spring game. And honestly, Russ, there was a lot of positives to take away from the spring game, yet there was some key pieces that were unavailable that did not participate in the spring game on Saturday. But from what we were able to see, it was a lot of positivity. And if there was one thing we could tell, Russ, it seemed the confidence was growing. And that was something Jack Dingle told us after the spring game in the media session was, felt like this confidence was growing, not only just for him personally, but for this team as well. Seems like they're a very well-knit group, and that's something Scott Satterfield hit on. But overall, there's a lot of positive things to take away from, Russ. Obviously, you get an offensive line that's returning everybody. Brendan Sorsby looked very well, in my opinion, at the quarterback position. Samaj Jones flashed a lot of potential as well. The prized possession in the prize recruit in the 2023 recruiting class. And then there's a lot of players that really stick out on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, you got a new defensive scheme that they're still implementing and putting in the packages for. So overall, Russ, it was a lot of great insight at the spring game on Saturday, but fans are going to be really excited once this season comes back rolling around.
Hope so. I think what I've kind of concluded from this spring, Neil, is that the team is not necessarily as talented at the top of the depth chart as it was in 2023. Not necessarily. They're a smidge less talented, I would say, at all of the starting positions. But when you factor in the amount of depth they have across all 22 spots now compared to last year and how crucial that depth is, not only in the sport of college football, but in power conference college football. You have to have that depth. You have to be able to weather those injuries, and you have to be able to rely on players all up and down the depth chart. And I think they're going to be more confidently able to do that this year. Obviously, we didn't see some key games out there, including transfer Tony Johnson. Haven't seen him much of the spring. He's dealing with an ailment right now and did not suit up for the spring game. D'Artagnan Tinsley also not out there. He was on a mobile cart, so to speak, with his leg all wrapped up. That's an extensive injury that has forced him to miss nearly Neil, half of spring almost. That happened about 2 or 3 weeks ago when he went down. And then you also have Xavier Henderson and Corey Kiner not participating in the spring game. That, Neil, though, felt more like these guys are good to go. We know what we have in them in terms of go-to options. We're going to get a deeper look at other receivers besides Xavier Henderson, and we're going to get a deeper look at other running backs, give a full workload to guys like Chance Williams, Evan Pryor, and Manny Covey, who got a lot of run as a redshirt freshman. So I thought that was smart by the coaching staff. I loved what I've seen from Henderson this spring. I loved what I've seen from Corey Kiner this spring. You know what you have in those guys, and you don't even need to get them those reps. It's more of an injury risk as opposed to them kind of getting kind of better and better with those reps, so to speak. They can kind of do that on their own and get a different look at these other guys. But overall, I think it was a solid spring for the Bearcats. No major injuries, Neil, that we know of in terms of season ending. There was no Joey Belgian type injury this time around. Joey, fortunately, knock on wood, staying healthy through this spring campaign, and the tight end position looking very strong in terms of the depth. We touched on that last week. But overall, getting into the big performers of the day, I would say my top performers would probably go to number one overall for me was Micah Coleman. I mean, Micah Coleman looked like a dude out there at the edge rushing position coming over from Eastern Michigan. They don't have confirmed starting roles, so to speak. They have the pods going right now that people could see in terms of just different projected starters mixed in with different guys lower on the depth chart that you would project. But Michael Coleman throughout the entire day was a force to be reckoned with. He had multiple pass breakups along the line of scrimmage. He had multiple sacks, including a couple that would have definitely been sacks, but they were blown off because of the red jersey being worn by the quarterbacks. And then just making penetrating plays all throughout the defensive output. I thought it was a good day for Micah Coleman, and he showed that he justifiably is I believe he was the first commit out of all of the winter transfers, and is justifying why he so quickly wanted to come to UC and showcase his skills here. Looked really good on that end. And then another guy that stood out to me, Neil, just in terms of a good performer, wasn't necessarily an MVP, and you don't want this guy probably to be the MVP of your team, or else it's not going that great in terms of season-wise, but kicker Carter Brown. You and I talked throughout the spring. I came up to you multiple times on the sidelines, and I said, Neil, I don't think I've seen Carter Brown hit a field goal longer than 35 yards this entire spring. What did he do on Saturday? Goes 2 for 2 inside of 40 yards and 1 for 1 from deep. Smashes a 55-yarder to show what his leg could do, especially in nice kicking conditions, which we had on Saturday, hovering around 70 degrees and no breeze on a sunny day at Nippert Stadium. That was great to see out of the special teams unit. Mason Fletcher looks really strong in that sense, and we'll just have to see how the kicking return game and the punt return game works out this season with Braden Smith gone. He struggled mightily last year, Neil. The kick return and the punt return game was a disaster for UT. Got to get that figured out. We'll see what ends up coming out of that in Camp Higher Ground. But overall, the guys who are kicking the footballs look really strong. Carter Brown and Mason Fletcher and Michael Coleman also stood out to me as well in terms of just overall MVPs of the day. Who were some names that stood out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to put clarification on it, Xavier Henderson did not participate for what it sounds like as a personal matter. So
Gotcha.
Sending thoughts and prayers to whatever Xavier Henderson might be dealing with, but it was a personal matter that held him out. But Russ, you talked about it. Micah Coleman looks like that dude up there on the defensive line alongside Dante Corleone. and you're getting a key returner and Eric Phillips as well. But Micah Coleman was a force to be reckoned with. And I mean, that was a lot of question marks coming in, was how would Cincinnati fill the void of losing guys like Jawan Briggs, who had a fantastic career, Daniel Griziak right there on the long side of him, and Micah Coleman could slide into that role of a Daniel Griziak and be just as successful, if not more successful.
Lost Van too, losing
and
Van
you
as
lose
well.
Malik Van as well. So I mean, overall, you're losing a lot of depth. You lost a lot of depth and talent up front, and key veteran experience. And then you come in, it was a very much priority in the transfer portal. But Micah Coleman, man, 6'5", 265, 270 pounds, and he's a force to be reckoned with. And I mean, also you pair that alongside Dante Corleone, and you will see a lot of those two get into the quarterback this season. If you watch this team, how the defensive scheme's coming along under Tyson Vite, it's safe to say that those two will be in the backfield very frequently, in my opinion, this season. But what I really liked, Russ, was the linebacker play on the defensive side of the ball. I thought Jonathan Thompson, Jack Dingle, Jared Bartlett in the mix there as well. I thought those three really held it down at the linebacker position. And man, once Dante Corleone and Michael Coleman and Eric Phillips get moving upfield and the linebackers coming behind them in the new scheme, it could be a fun time with this new defensive scheme under Tyson Vite. And then flash things over to the offensive side of the ball, obviously with no Xavier Henderson, no Tony Johnson, Sterling Burkhalter. Got to keep an eye on him for what he's done this spring. He's had a fantastic spring ball. Obviously, he was someone who came in last season, couldn't really quite find his footing in year one, but he's poised for a big role in year two. Obviously, a bigger frame, 6'3", close to 210. And I mean, Russ, he had that great catch through double coverage after Sorsby rolled out right, got to run in a little bit. And
that was then the red zone trip, right?
Towards
the north end of the field, north end zone. Yeah.
Yep. Came down at the 2, but it was an absolute beautiful ball from Brendan Sorsby. Threaded a needle through double coverage to find Sterling Burkhalter. And overall, I thought Brendan Sorsby looked fantastic. Russ, I thought he was able to open more things up once he started to get rolling in the pocket a little bit and was able to use his legs. You kind of see it was a little bit more comfortable. But Samaj Jones, man, let's talk about him. Prized possession right there in the class of 2023. Comes out. I thought he threw. Everybody knows what kind of zip he has on the ball, Russ. I think we've talked about it quite frequently this spring about, he's got that zip. He's got that speed behind the ball. He's got the power. But once he opens things up in the run game, I mean, he scored the first touchdown of the spring game with a 15-yard quarterback draw to the left. Then he came back, had another one. But overall, Samaj Jones, guys, he looks to be the part early on. Scott Satterfield said he's up there close to 6 foot, 210, and he's benching more than some linebackers right now. So it's pretty impressive for what a guy like Samaj Jones could do. But Russ, overall, I mean, linebacker room, quarterback play, offensive line, I thought everything, there was a lot of positives to take away from the spring game for sure, but my MVP would have to go to Micah Coleman.
Yeah, I think Micah Coleman just popped out the most of any of these players. And touching on Sorsby, who it's a quarterback competition. It's not really a competition. Like Sorsby looks the part. He spun it like a QB1. He commanded the offense like a QB1. And I was actually it was refreshing hearing him in the post game, Neil, because I told you last week, I was like, I want to hear from Sorsby what his exact kind of expertise in this playbook looks like. Yeah. Like what I asked him, he kind of touched on it in the beginning of the press conference, but I wanted him to hammer it home. I wanted to get a direct kind of gauge on what he thought his comfortability level was with the playbook out of 10. I asked him, out of 10, what's your comfortability level right now? And he said, hovering around a 7-ish right now. So I think that's good honesty. That's probably right about where you should expect someone to be at this point of the spring. And he looked like he has strong cadences, has strong ability to operate the offense deal, but also has some areas where he can improve, areas where he can shore things up. And obviously he's going to be able to use that giant frame and use it with a little bit more physicality once that red jersey comes off. And there are no red jerseys on Saturdays in sport of college football. So except for the ones that you just wear normally, and you're still getting cracked up on by a linebacker or safety or cornerback or defensive lineman anyway. So I thought Sorsby looked solid, made some great throws, a few great throws, had a couple misses here and there. I don't know if I would say fantastic, but he did enough to make me think there's still no competition to be made in this room right now. And it's going to be Brendan Sorsby's job, in my opinion. On top of that, another guy I think we should shout out before we get to the basketball side of things to close out the show, Neil, Cale Woodburn. What a spring for the freshman.
Mhm.
Early enrollee, doing exactly what you hope to do as an early enrollee. Get all of those early rough days out of the way. Get in that weight room with Coach Nico Palizzetti and start adding on to that 145-pound frame, which Woodburn said, I believe he told a reporter or told Dan Horde this, that he hopes to be around 175. Yeah, 170 once the season starts. And if he's hovering around that, maybe it's big enough to get him on the field. We'll see. Is a true freshman and has flashed enough potential and talent that makes you think maybe they want to go with the Barry Jackson route like they did last year in terms of trying to make sure you have as many years as possible with this player, and them being Kel Woodburn, so small at this point in their career, don't necessarily want to roll them out there for 12 plus games and that kind of size. We'll see what happens though. Kel Woodburn, the dude just separates. The dude gets open, and that's the name of the game in the sport of football. If it don't matter how big you are, Neil, if you can separate away from people and run away from them, doesn't matter.
And anybody who turned on the tape too could see that. Blazing speed, was a track champion. Blazing speed. I mean, we saw it on the 30-yard touchdown. I mean, he was 2-3 steps ahead of him almost, and then came down to it at the end, came down with a nice ball at the back pylon. But Kel Woodburn, fantastic spring. I think that was kind of what people were expecting him to do, but come in, put a little bit of weight on under Coach Palizzetti, and guys, he's going to be a name to keep an eye on just because of his speed. If you can put him at 170 and he's still running 23 miles an hour like Coach Satterfield said he was, close to 22 and a half, 23 range, guys, watch out. Watch out, because that's another dynamic option. Opportunities awaiting right there at that wide receiver position for a guy like Kel Woodburn.
No doubt. At that age, to be able to move that fast, I mean, the human body, people, it can't go much faster than 23 miles per hour in short bursts. There's no cheetah level short burst speeds getting achieved by humans just yet in the year 2024. We'll see where we're at in the decades beyond. We'll see where we're at with the college basketball side of things in just a moment. The Bearcats still yet to add a player in the transfer portal, taking their time, doing their due diligence like they did last year. And there is some visit news that Neil and I got to talk about coming up on Bearcat Blitz. Bearcat Blitz back at you on the Believe Network. Catch us on YouTube, Talk with Russ Heltman, and on podcast platforms, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, all that good stuff. Subscribe, rate, and review there, where we had a report from Bearcat Journal's Chad Brendel, Neil. Connor Hickman, the NIT tournament foe from Bradley, played pretty well against Cincinnati in that contest. 6'3", 200-pound guard taking a transfer visit to Cincinnati. Could be chopping it up with Coach Miller as we speak during this recording right now, as he just wrapped up a visit with Indiana. And Neil, it feels as though those are the two schools vying for Connor Hickman's services most seriously. And it's going to come down to Bloomington and Clifton. Which spot does Connor Hickman think will give him the best chance at furthering his professional basketball dreams? We will find out in the coming weeks. But Hickman reported, according to Bearcat Journal's Chad Brendel, to be on campus this week and on Monday to be exact. And I think, Neil, that would be the great guard option. I don't know about great guard option, but a solid guard option to hunt from the transfer portal. Great size at that. Can shoot the ball very well. 40.2% from deep on nearly 5 attempts per game, or nearly 6 attempts per game. 5.9 attempts per game. I think he would fit right in alongside Seamus Lukosius, Day Thomas, potentially CJ Frederick, who I'm assuming is coming back at this point because there's been no kind of retiree or entering the transfer portal announcement from CJ, and we're getting to be almost 3 weeks past the end of the season at this point. So in terms of that guard rotation, adding Connor Hickman, I would love it. I think it would be a great addition for Cincinnati, and you'd be getting a guy who's averaging 14.5 points, 3.4 rebounds per game this season on 46.7% shooting. A player, Neil, who is very efficient, does not take a lot of bad shots, gets to the rim with force, and shoots the three ball with force, and does it on a very nice, efficient shot diet at that. I think this could be a winning combination, Hickman and the Bearcats.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only is Connor Hickman on campus, there was reports stating that Kirk Carissa was going to visit Cincinnati following his visit to St. John's that took place over the weekend. And another name to keep an eye on, that a guy that Bearcats fans are familiar with, and that's Dallin Hall from BYU, who is now reported interest from Cincinnati. So there's a lot of talent out there in the point guard, Russ, despite Connor Hickman being on campus potentially today, according to Chad Brendel of Bearcat Journal. But overall, they have their options out there in the point guard. I mean, Dallin Hall was fantastic for BYU and was a key contributor for Mark Pope and the Cougars this past season. A guy
He's kind of like
able
the same player as Hickman too. Like they have the same build, and Hall basically
I
he
think
averaged
Hall's
like
a
9
little
points.
bit bigger.
Yeah, Hall's
Hall's
like
got a
what,
little bit
6'5"?
more frame.
Yeah, but I mean, he basically averaged what you would expect Hickman to average at UC if he came over from Bradley this year, which is around 9-10 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, something like that. So, and a similar shooting splits as well for Hall.
Yeah, and you also throw Kirk Carissa in that category. So, I mean, you're looking at 2 guards potentially with Big 12 experience. Kirk Carissa was recruited hard by Cincinnati. The last transfer portal cycle was a year ago. Dallin Hall is kind of gauging his interest still early in the process, but Connor Hickman, Dallin Hall, Kirk Carissa, I mean, it's kind of see the kind of talent that they're looking at. And those are 3 names to keep an eye on because no matter what, looks like they're targeting another point guard. And Connor Hickman had a fantastic season, but people also got to realize that there's a connection between Connor Hickman and the University of Cincinnati, and that stems from Coach Drew Adams, who spent 7 seasons at Bradley and was a key contributor to getting a guy like Connor Hickman to Bradley. But Indiana's still highly in the mix. Obviously, he is from the Bloomington area, so for Connor Hickman, it appears it's coming down between Indiana and Cincinnati. Nobody knows which way it's going to go yet, unfortunately. But still a lot of big names to keep an eye on things. And then, Russ, now that we're talking about some recruiting basketball news, let's flip it over to go the women's basketball side of things.
Yeah, close it out with that.
Local 2025 top 5 prospect Dee Alexander announced earlier this morning her top 3 schools, including Cincinnati, Illinois, and Ohio State. And Russ, I mean, it's safe to say that Dee Alexander could be the biggest recruit in women's basketball history at the University of Cincinnati if she elects to stay home and play for the Bearcats. I mean, 3 state championships, arguing for a 4th upcoming senior season, but a 6'1" combo guard who can score at all 3 levels, an elite defender. She's a proven winner, just overall great player. But I mean, you look at some of the offers she had, Russ, 35 plus offers coming out as of right now for Dee Alexander. And you can see what Katrina Merriweather and this staff are doing, and they're targeting some of the best players in the country. Obviously, they hosted another big-time player in the transfer portal over the weekend from Arizona. So they're building, Russ. They're building this thing back up. And if you can land a caliber player like Dee Alexander, I think that commitment right there could take Cincinnati Bearcats women's basketball back to national conversation. And Dee Alexander, I mean, you look down, Russ, and when was the last time a top 5 player has ever committed to Cincinnati in either sport, men's or women's basketball? So Dee Alexander
Kenyon? Is it Kenyon Martin? Is that like the last time? That's before the major services were even ranking people. So I mean, Oscar Robertson, I believe back in the ranking days back then was a top 5 player nationally because it was a bit of an upset that UC got him in his services. Mm-hmm. But I mean, these are decades apart, Neil, and legendary names that we're talking about right there.
Yeah, but if it's an opportunity where if Dee Alexander does decide to choose Cincinnati over Illinois and Ohio State, Russ, I'll say it right now, there's a chance that she could greatly find her career escalating to the next level where she could go down as one of the greatest Bearcats of all time. And you're looking at the likes of Cheryl Cook, Lori Pirtle, and many others. But there's a chance Dee Alexander could do something very special if she elects to stay home at Cincinnati. So overall, that's some big-time news because Katrina Merriweather, despite finishing 14-18 in year 1 and making it to the NIT, she's got this program trending in the right direction, Russ. And, I mean, you look at the track record. Coach Merriweather is a proven winner, known to recruit. So this staff's doing a fantastic job. But anytime you can keep a local talent, Russ, right here at home, it's a great feeling and a great opportunity. So seeing her in the top 3 for Cincinnati has been a great start to the day for Katrina Merriweather and this staff.
No doubt about it. Some big things happening on the hardwood all over the place. And to close things out real quick, some other transfer portal pings for the men's side of things. Jacoby Coles, TCU, 6'8" transfer forward, 42% outside shooter, averaged 10 points, 3.8 rebounds per game at 6'8", 215 pounds for TCU this past season. Could be a great stretch 4 option to go alongside Aziz Bandaogo and help kind of cement that backcourt, front court a little bit more on top of another depth piece, I would imagine, in that front court. And then also another guard contact here, LaSalle Jr., Khalil Brantley, 38.7% shooter, 32.2% from deep, 15.1 points per game, and 5.3 rebounds at 6'1" last season. So those are some names to keep an eye out for the Bearcats. He's Neil Meyer. I'm Russ Heltman. This has been Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online, presented on the Believe Network. Have a great week, everybody.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a 3.